Okay, so we're going to look at modifying our game here to use interrupts. And so in a microcontroller, interrupt is something that can kind of pause the processor to execute something. And so basically what you do is you write a function and you will configure an interrupt. And when that interrupt gets triggered, it will call that function and execute some code. And so there's different kinds of interrupts you can have. There's timer interrupts, specific software interrupts, hardware interrupts, and so we're going to look at external interrupts or hardware interrupts that are triggered by GPIO, or interrupts that are triggered by the pins, and specifically like a pin change. Okay, and so when we have an interrupt, we want to create an interrupt callback or service routine. So we'll call it button ISR, and ISR stands for interrupt service routine. Okay, and in here we're going to set the button pressed. We're going to have a button pressed flag, and we'll start it off as none, so no button is pressed. And then in our button ISR, what we do is we actually have to have an argument here. It's going to print out the pin that got called. Okay? And so depending on that pin, we would want to check to see, like in this case, which player it is. And so we'll say if P equals 1, button pressed equals 1. Or no, equals, I guess that works for us, yeah. But in case you have the different numbers, then we can do like an elif P equals 2, equals 2, and then we're going to have an else case where we say print unhandled button press on pin. Alright, and if we do things right, we'll never see this. And then we're going to say here, one other thing we have to do is, if we want to edit a variable inside of our function here, we have to label it with a global flag. And so we're going to say global button pressed. And this allows us to edit it inside of this function. Otherwise, it makes like a local copy. Now, a couple notes here. So when we do this, it basically pauses the processor and executes this before returning to kind of the normal execution. And so when you have an ISR, interrupt service routine, you really want to make it execute as quickly as possible. And so this kind of stuff is good where you set a flag or like change the value of a variable. This is bad. We don't really want to be printing stuff because printing takes a long time and use a lot of memory, and even can like do like memory allocation, which we won't really get into that right now, but there's a lot of reasons not to do this, but because this is because basically this will help us out if we're doing something wrong here. So we're just gonna leave it for now. Ideally, you would get rid of this though and have maybe an else case where you set a different flag or something like that. Okay, so we've got that, and now what we're gonna do is we're just gonna instead here, when we do check buttons, we're just going to now return button pressed. Okay, because now all the work is being done here in our ISR. Okay, and then when we set it here, we're going to set button pressed equal to none here. When we set cheater to none, and we're going to set it to none here when we set winner to none. Okay, so we kind of reset that value when we start doing our checks. Okay, and we've basically done it. There's one kind of big thing we still need to do is we need to configure these buttons in order to use that interrupt. And so we're going to say button1.irq. And so and IRQ stands for interrupt request, and so we're configuring it to request an interrupt, and we're going to have to do some configuring. So we're going to set what the trigger is, and so we're going to trigger it on pin.irq falling. Okay, there's a couple other ways that we could do it. We can do it on the rising edge or the falling edge, and then there's also, I think, level interrupts too. But the idea here is we want to use falling because our pin is getting pulled up to 3.3 volts, and when we press the button, it's going to fall to ground, and so because it's changing from high to low, we want to detect when it falls to down like that. Okay, and then we also want to register our handler here. So we're going to say handler equals button ISR like that. Okay, and so we're going to do the same thing right here for button 2. Okay, now we can create a separate ISR for each of them, like a separate handler or callback, but because we set up to process both of them, this is a pretty simple way to do it. We can just reuse the code there. Maybe save a little bit of time not doing this comparison, but I mean, it's pretty quick regardless. So, okay, and so I think that's everything. Let's go ahead and give it a try. So I'm going to run the code here. Oh, didn't like that. Look at that. So it's saying they're unhandled. So I need to fix the comparison. So let me think about how to do this. Okay, so we need to figure out how to extract the pin number here. So let's start by just going like this. So there's a pin object is P, and so we are treating it as just the pin number. It's the pin object is the problem. So we're going to print out the ID here. Okay, and see what we get if that's what we want. So when I press the button, it has no attribute ID. Okay, so that's not working. Let's see if I try, what were the other attributes we had? Maybe we could try print p.gpio. Really what I need to do is look up the information about this in class. See if that does it. Nope. Okay. So I'm going to pause this and look up some. Okay, so it turns out there's actually not an easy way to do this. We can use what's called a lambda function, and pass in the ID. But for now, we're just going to make a separate ISR. We'll call it ISR1, ISR2, and then we can simplify these functions. And so we'll make this one to be ISR1, and this one ISR2. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go like this. Now we have to do a change here because since both of them can affect that variable, we're going to say if button pressed is none, and then we'll say like that. Okay, and we'll do that for each of them. And basically, we're doing a check to see if it's already pressed by the other one, and we're setting the value. Okay, so this is maybe not the best way to do it, but this is a limitation of Micropython. So we're not really ready to learn about lambda functions, so we'll do this. And we run it. Button ISR1 is not defined. Oh, let's change that. Now we run it, and there you go. Looks like it worked. Reading. There we go. So the one other thing we got to fix here, we got to set button press to none. It should do it right there. I guess not. Okay, I think we're good now. Okay, yep, it's good now. So this should work using interrupts. And now, instead of pulling for a button, we are just checking to see if we have a flag that has been pressed. Okay, and if we want to get even better timing, what we could do is we could actually grab the time in these ISRs instead of getting the time right here, and that would allow us to get a more precise time as well.